So, tell your neighbors that quality, affordable childcare is just an election away.
It was a time of high hopes. Last summer, ahead in the polls, the NDP seemed on the verge of making history by winning national government for the first time.
That with just a handful more seats starting right here in the Ottawa region, we will defeat Stephen Harper and build the Canada of our dreams.
But on election night, the dream turned out to be a nightmare. The NDP lost 1 million votes and slipped from official opposition back to third party, from 95 seats down to 44. There would be no storybook ending.
The next chapter begins in our effort to build a better Canada. Thank you. Merci. On continue.
That rebuilding process begins at the convention this weekend, with a focus squarely on the leader.
You know, the convention will undoubtedly be about Tom and the leadership, and it's an important opportunity for the membership to have their say. And whatever they decide in the coming days, whatever they decide, they're going to be looking forward to say, look, we've had a setback. That's okay, but now we're looking forward.
Sherry DeNovo is a longtime NDP member of the Ontario Legislature. She said that the party would do better looking forward without Tom Mulcair as leader.
Really, I've said what I will say about leadership. Do I think that leadership has to take responsibility for the disaster of the last campaign? I think they do. Do I think that means that Tom Mulcair has to take responsibility? I think it does.
Meanwhile, the Labour movement is wrestling with whether or not to support Tom Mulcair. Hassam Youssef, the head of the Canadian Labour Congress, the umbrella group representing the country's major unions, is now saying that Tom Mulcair's poor performance means he must step down. But many of the leaders of unions affiliated with the CLC disagree. 5 major national unions have signed an open letter supporting Mulcair. Among them, the Steelworkers and CUPE, the country's largest public sector union.
We've been talking about the last election for months. We've all had our debriefings. We've all looked at why we didn't do very well. And Tom's leadership has been at question. And there's people out there calling for his head. And as unions, we decided that we needed to talk to our leadership, which we did as CUPE, and we decided that we needed to support Tom.
Journalist Susan Delacourt has followed many elections and many leadership campaigns.
They say that the opposite of love isn't hate, but apathy. I think that the opposite of a full endorsement is faint praise, and that's what you're hearing from Mulcair, and that's, if I were him, I would be worried.
The party brass, led by outgoing President Rebecca Blakey, conducted a review of the mistakes of the last election. The review concluded that those running the campaign weren't nimble enough in responding to issues like the niqab. And the most common complaint?
There is a feeling that, unfortunately, the balanced budget pledge overshadowed much of the rest of the platform. And a lot of Democrats have said, because they actually read the platform, there was some really good stuff in there, but we didn't hear enough about it because, unfortunately, the balanced budget narrative seemed to take over. And so that is a concern that we've heard, and that's why it's reflected there.
Brad Levine was a senior advisor during the election campaign. He defends the decision to stick with a no-deficit policy.
The frustrating thing about politics is that I think that the country is more willing to listen to Liberals say one thing in July, we're going to balance the books, but then in early August, wait a minute, no, sorry, we're going to run deficits. New Democrats have a different standard to uphold, where we have to be consistent. Mr. Mulcair was very consistent on this front, and he was very emphatic.
Tom Mulcair has tried to get out in front of the criticism and the anger since the election. Since January, he's been crisscrossing the country, talking to groups large and small.
I assume all of the responsibility as leader of the party, but at the same time, we know that this is the second best result we've ever had in terms of the number of seats. 3.5 million Canadians put their confidence in the NDP.
For the most part, Mulcair has the support of his caucus, but there have been exceptions. At an Ottawa press conference, Manitoba MP Nikki Ashton was grilled by reporters for 20 minutes and still refused to say whether or not she supported Tom Mulcair.
You know, I'm proud of the work that we're doing, and and I realize the processes are in place, whether it's the review or the actual party review or the leadership review. Those will take place.
Party President Rebecca Blakey has suggested that Mulcair needs a 70% approval rating at the convention to stay on. Tom Mulcair won't be that specific.
Well, the right number is going to be the best number I can possibly get.
So many folks are going there determined to support the leader. Others are less sure about their support, and others are, waiting to have a chance to chat with other members from across the country on the floor and make up their mind.
Avi Lewis grew up within the NDP. His father Stephen led the Ontario NDP, and his grandfather David led the Federal Party. So what does he think will happen to Tom Mulcair?
There's clearly lots of people who are upset with him, and there are clearly lots of people who are utterly devoted to him. And the vote will come down where it comes down. But I mean, just looking at the history of the party, it would be unprecedented to have a major revolt at a moment like this.
No matter what delegates decide about leadership, they'll also be discussing policy at this convention. There'll be lots of talk about the LEAP Manifesto. That's a nonpartisan petition launched last summer and signed by 30,000 Canadians. It calls for dramatic change, including a commitment to a zero-carbon economy. Avi Lewis, one of its authors, is promoting it at the convention.
And where I think I see a connection to the LEAP Manifesto and the current wave of interest in the LEAP Manifesto within the NDP is that the LEAP is an inspiring, hopeful, optimistic, exciting, grand vision that has a narrative.
But no matter what policy options New Democrats embrace this weekend, the bigger story will be whether Tom Mulcair remains as leader to champion those policies.
Raphaël s'est joint à la famille il y a quelques heures.